Welcome everyone to a special edition of Stats Raceland's handicapping and earlier than usual Travers Stakes Saturday and the Ellis Park Derby, which will be run on Sunday as the last major prep this year for the Kentucky Derby. Wild year it's been. I'm Dan Tordjman with America's Best Racing, and with me are the two stars of this show, TVG's Christina Blacker and the Uber capper, Ellis Starr from Equibase. Christina, let's kick it off with you. How are things going in your world?
Things are going very well. Looking forward to another exciting weekend out at Del Mar. And of course, following all the racing at Saratoga, dialed into all of it. You know, the schedule works out well for me because I get the opportunity to watch all the races from Saratoga in the morning, then work Del Mar and just kind of feel like I'm in the loop as far as it all goes. So I have been looking forward to this weekend just as much as anybody and was waiting eagerly for those past performances to come out.
Christina checking in from California, but we'll tease a little bit ahead here to the Travers and let people know she is no homer. She's going to disappoint some people in California with her Travers pick coming up. Alice, you were live with me on a stream last Saturday. You had Echo Town as a best bet. I think won at about 7-1. Can we count on you for another lock at a price this weekend?
Not a lock, but there's two races we're going to talk about, which I have opinions against the favorites. Yes, and it's good to be on with Christina. Last time Christina and I were together, we did the Keeneland home show for the whole week during the Keeneland week meet, which sounds so strange, by the way. But it was a lot of fun, and it's great to be back, the band back together.
I was watching from home myself. You both did a wonderful job. And let's see if we could build on some of that momentum. Before we start, though, I do want to mention that tonight we'll be analyzing the races for this weekend using one of the most powerful tools in handicapping, Stats Racelands. And for a limited time, you can get an annual unlimited subscription to Stats Racelands. That's every card, every day for a year for $400 off the price of an annual subscription. So what do you have to do? You got to use promo code SAVE400. That's the word SAVE and then 400 and sign up. So you go to sign up for your annual unlimited subscription, use code SAVE400. This offer, by the way, only a flash sale. It expires on Sunday. So if you want to get in on this awesome deal, now's the time. Save 400. All right, let's jump into Saturday's action at Saratoga. We're going to kick it off with race 7, the Ballerina. Speed. There is so much speed signed up for this race. And I know just from reading some of the notes on this race coming in that both Ellis and Christina have really factored in how the pace might unfold in this race and potentially might lead to a little bit of an upset in this race. Let's kick it off with Christina and start with that discussion about pace.
Yeah, Dan, it really is going to be a tricky race, isn't it? Because first of all, you've got the 7 furlong distance in here. So you have those speedsters that are trying to extend themselves the full 7 furlongs. And then you also have the presence of so much speed in this race. The True Odds page is one of my favorites to look at for any race, but especially a race like this. And I also like to look at the race projection, which you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. That's kind of going to talk to you a little bit about how these horses are going to run early on, who's going to be on the front end. And I find it very intriguing, and I agree with this quite a bit myself, that Ballerina, the 4-horse, projects to be on the lead. And I think there really is something to be said for the California speed. You know, I might not be a homer in terms of my selection later on, but as far as the early pace goes, and, you know, the track out here at Del Mar is a little different this summer than it has been in the past. I think it's a little bit deeper, and these horses are especially fit. So I do expect Ballerina to be right up there, and that is going to press Serengeti Empress quite a bit. We know she only has one way of going. We know she loves Saratoga, and I respect the Kentucky Oaks winner from 2019 quite a bit. But I think the pace in here, if we filter it for the late pace figure, that's one that I always like to look at, because I think it talks to you a little bit about how these horses are going to run early, who's going to be closing late. And interestingly, it kind of points you a little bit to Victim of Love in terms of how she is going to be finishing the race. But as far as class goes, I wanted to find class and I wanted to find a closer. So if we go back to the past performances, ultimately, I settled on Pink Sands in here for Shug McGahee. I thought that if you look at her couple of races towards the end of 2019 into 2020 in the Rampart and the inside information at Gulfstream, you know, she was really starting to come into herself. You see the win, that 102 Equibase speed figure. She was really putting it all together. And off that race and off the layoff on June 13th in the Ogden Fifth, they really threw her into the deep end. And that's kind of unshug-like to me. She had to run into She's a Julie that day, point of all. So then I went ahead and I filtered Shug McGahee as far as second off the layoff in stakes races. And this is an angle that I was intrigued by because I know his horses are probably going to improve second off the layoff, but I wanted to make it as specific as I could and then start talking about stakes. And you'll end up seeing that Shug is about 21% in this angle, and that's a difficult position to be so high percentage. So Pink Sands is ultimately going to be my selection in here, Dan. I'm kind of combining a little bit. I'm combining the angle with Shug McGahee, the pace that I think is going to be blazing hot up front, and the class and the fact that I think this filly is really coming on right now.
And look, I think you're going to find some agreement from Ellis as well. Ellis, you also like Pink Sands, am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go back to that true odds page with the pace. And sometimes, you know, you look at a race on paper first, and then you decide, well, I'm going to look at with Sats Raceland. You have the option of looking at statistics, angles if they match, and also you have the option of looking at pace. In this case, I looked at pace first because I wanted to make sure that I was right. So I sorted like we are doing. We're sorting on the running style. And you will see that there are a lot of E horses in the race. Serengeti Empress, Cookie Dough, who really, in my opinion, can be E and what we call EEP because she's run second and still won early. Serengeti Empress has to have the lead to win. You got Latruska. And when we go and look, we won't look at Latruska's PPs, but she's a horse that's had the lead at the first and second calls in all of her races, including a mile at Gulfstream where she went 44-4. Serengeti Empress is on the rail. That means the horse has to go. There's no doubt in my mind that she can't escape it. Serengeti Empress is therefore vulnerable, even a false second choice here at 5-2, and I'm completely taking a stand against her. When you look at the early pace scenario, you'll see the one Serengeti Empress on the rail, but she's going to push out. That's going to put Victim of Love right in that beautiful catbird seat on the rail, sitting second, third, or fourth, and then Pink Sands. And Pink Sands can come around as she did, as Christina pointed out in the inside information, and get it job done. So the one, I think, is a very good horse to take a stand against. It opens up the race. Bellafina is okay. We're going to go look at the PPs now, and we'll take a look at, we don't need to look at Bellafina. Serengeti Empress, we can look right away. She's off form as well, but she always has the lead. If you want to switch to the 4 Bellafina, you'll see she comes from just off the pace. I want to pay attention to those speed figures of 106 and 108 in their last two races because we're going to use it as a reference point. And then when you go down to Victim of Love, who's 15-1 here, she ran the best race of her career last time out with a 108 Equibase speed figure. She's a 4-year-old. She's 5 for 15 in her career. She's lightly raced. She's under bet. She's under respected here. And if she does repeat that last race, she can run huge. She did beat Come Dancing, who's 3-1 here, which Come Dancing really had no excuse at 9-5. So they're still not giving Victim of Love a lot of credit. Then we move over to Pink Sands, who Christina touched on already. The inside information, that was a 102 Equibase speed figure. Bellafina, who we looked at earlier, was a 108. Victim of Love ran just as fast. So I'm looking at these two, Victim of Love and Pink Sands. They're both good win bets. I will bet them both to win at anything above 3-1. I really have no interest in Serengeti Empress. I might use Bellafina and Come Dancing and exact this with the two long shots.
Yeah, you know, I was I'm with you there with Victim of Love and Pink Sands based on all the reasons you both mentioned, specifically the pace being so hot and the race potentially setting up for those horses. Interestingly, with Victim of Love, the trainer you may not recognize, Todd Beatty, the Vagrancy was his first graded stakes win in 6 years. But this is a trainer who previously trained Taurus when she won the Raven Run at Keeneland in 2014. Also trained multiple graded stakes winner Fabulous Strike. So a trainer certainly with some sprinters who has some history and has some specific history within this division with female sprinters. So that's one thing to consider. Look, for me, I landed on Bellafina. I can appreciate the point that Christina made about California speed being different and that potentially Bellafina, you know, might find herself up front with the rest of these. But for me, the one thing that's clear based on looking at her past performances is that she's not great at breaking from the gate, and she tends to be a lot better when she can relax off a fast pace rather than setting the pace herself. And then also, she doesn't really love racing down on the inside. Instead, she prefers to kind of race in the clear. If you watch the replays and you read some of the notes, and you can look at some of the races there where you see that red little indicator on the right side, if you go 3 races back, off slow, in tight early. If you watch her races, she always really is just super slow out of the gate. So I think even if she has sort of the best natural speed and might be able to go and sort of set the pace, I think she's going to lose a step or two out of the gate. But that doesn't concern me. I think that actually works to her advantage here because there is so much other speed. I think she stalks and pounces. And I do want to point out, since when you look at Bellafina, you kind of look at her races and you see that all the wins and all the big races come at Santa Anita. So the criticism is she just a Santa Anita horse? Can she win elsewhere? Can she do anything elsewhere? I'd argue that the Los Al race last out wasn't bad at all. And then I'd also look at her trainer in particular, trainer Simon Callahan. The past 5 years, you could do searches, customize all sorts of searches on Stats Race Lens. I did a search for domestic shippers for Simon Callahan using today's circuit in particular. So when he brings horses over from out west to the East Coast, how do they do? You can see right there, 12 starts, 3 wins, 5 in the money. That's really, really good because you're looking at a lot of, these are all stakes races essentially here, although you probably recognize some of the names there, including Taurus, who we mentioned a moment ago, who he later trained, who was previously trained by Todd Beatty. Now, what you could also do on Stats Race and say, hey, look, there are a couple of other trainers in this race who are also shipping in, who don't usually run on this circuit. How do they do when they ship horses into this circuit? So you hit the show all function on the top right. And when you hit the show all function, it shows you how trainers like Tom Amoss, how he does when he's bringing horses in. You can see he only wins at a 10% clip. Juan Alvarado, trainer of the 2-horse Cookie Dough, who we mentioned, he's 0 for 4. So these are smaller samples, but it's a good little tool here that you find on Stats Race Lens where you can compare some of these trainers bringing horses in and, do they ship with purpose? Are they being pressured by owners who just want to see their horses in a big race at Saratoga? Well, you can, with some confidence, see Simon Callahan, of course, whenever he comes out east, he's generally bringing a horse that's ready to run a big race. Even though it's a small sample, I have confidence in him, and I have a lot of confidence in Bellafina. Whatever way it plays out, I think she wins. I think the only scenario in which she doesn't win is if she just does somehow get caught up in that early pace and kind of wears herself out. So I think we're well covered there on the Ballerina. I think it should be a really fun race to watch. And although it's a small field, it's a super classy and competitive field. So looking forward to that one. We move on to race 8 on Saturday at Saratoga. It's the Troy Stakes. This is one in particular that Ellis had some opinions on. They're going 5.5 on the turf. It's a grade 3. When they go 5.5 on the turf, anything could happen. So Ellis, how did you see this unfolding?
Well, this is similar now. So we'll go to the pace and we'll see turf sprints. And I think there's 2 horses that I really view them as the irresistible object and the immovable force, and those are American Sailor and Pulsate. And when you sort on the run style, you will see that you have those 2 horses plus Pure Sensation. I'm not Pulsate, American Sailor, I'm sorry, and Pure Sensation, maybe Shecky Sabaz. You'll also notice Pure Sensation and Shecky Sabaz are 5-2 and 3-1. We'll talk about them. We'll talk about Imprimi, who I think is another vulnerable favorite. Really sets up closers here. If you sort on the late pace here, and you'll see who has the best option here. Imprimi, who I'll talk about, yes, but Chewing Gum and Pulsate are next. So we're going to talk about those 2 in a second. So now I'll go to PPs. You got an idea of the pace here, and let's see how that shakes out. So first, we'll start with the 1 Imprimi. And you'll see she's 8-5. She's 8-5 because she ran the Breeders' Cup Sprint last fall. But those last 4 races were not that great. 6th, 3rd, 4th, 6th. She's being asked to come back off a 9-month layoff against horses that are as good as she is when she's in top form, but they've got the benefit of recency here. So I think for me at 8-5 is very beatable here. Then go to American Sailor real quick. You'll see American Sailor absolutely, positively, all those 1s at the 1st and 2nd call. Now we'll ship over to 5 Pure Sensation, and you'll see that he's been first or second at the first call in every one of his races, and in his wins, he led at the first call every time. That's why I think that American Sailor and Pure Sensation get into a battle that makes Pure Sensation vulnerable 3-1. We already said Impremi was vulnerable at 8-5, in my opinion. Then go to the 4 Shecky Shabazz, also 5-2. Very interesting. The last time the horse won was a Claiming Crown race back in December. Last time out third, ran okay. 5-2 in the race. American Sailor got run down. I'm taking a stand against him. Move to the outside now to the 2 horses that had the second and third best late pace figures. We'll start with the 7 Chewing Gum for Belmont. Great to have the outside post in this position. That 109 Echo-based speed figure, one back, is going to be as good or better than any of the favorites I just talked about. Joel Rosario rode the horse perfectly June 12th at Belmont, and not disgraced last time out, stepping up a little bit at Belmont at 7 furlongs, but back to 5.5, 6 is right, hits this horse right between the eyes, and that's Chewing Gum. Move inside to Pulsate, and you'll see something really interesting. When we look at Pulsate, when we look at the company line, you'll see Front Run, the Fed, Delaware, and Chewing Gum. That was the same race. And you'll see that Pulsate was a nose from Chewing Gum, who was a nose behind the runner-up Delaware. And here, Chewing Gum is 5-1, and Pulsate is 15-1, where just it could have been the opposite, where Chewing Gum might have been behind Pulsate, yet Pulsate's 3 times the odd. One before last with Manny Franco, a sharp 102 at 6 on the grass at Aqueduct. That's the same level of race, a second level allowance that Chewing Gum won. And so I think these two have a big shot. I'm going to bet them both to win, key them both in exactas and trifectas and pick threes, because this is where you get value with a couple chalks coming up after this race.
Love that, and you're going to want to take advantage of any value you can find in these later races, because we're about to get chalky, folks. We're going to get real chalky. So let's move on to race 10, and let's start talking about some of that chalk. The 10th race is the Test Stakes, and it features Gamine, who has shown flashes of greatness. Of course, when I saw the early probables for this race, there were a couple of other horses who had speed, and I thought, oh, like, maybe they can go with Gamine and try to, weaken her a little bit. Those horses didn't end up showing up, and there's a little bit of other speed in this race. Not sure if they're going to be able to go with her. Christina, I know you're pretty much all in on Gamine, but we're not going to let you get away with that exactly. We need a bet, right? So we need an exacta. We need a price underneath. Give us something aside from Gamine.
Yeah, I know, right? I think we're all in on Gamine. I am as well. There's a lot of people that will talk about, the bounce theory and could it happen, because she did improve pretty dramatically in the Acorn last set at Belmont. And I'm just here to tell you, Bob Baffert trains his horses for fitness, and he is one of those guys that horses just don't bounce for him. They don't regress. I'll also let you know that I've seen her. I've watched her train. She is still growing, and I mean that in a very good way. She's really filling out into that big kind of leggy frame that she has. I think she's getting better and better right now. And honestly, and there's no, point in it, but I think he could run her in the Ballerina against the older horses, and she'd probably beat them too. She's that good. I do want to take a look at the True Odds page, just because if you're a novice and you're kind of learning and you're wondering what tools can help you out, one of the advantages to this page on the bottom right-hand corner there is that win percentage. If you're just a numbers person, that 63.5% win percentage for Gamine, you're not going to see that very often at all. So that's how much of a cinch she looks like in here. But if we go back to the past performances, if I'm going to give you an exacta and try to find a horse that is going to boost that price a little bit for you, for me, it's the number 3, Mrs. Danvers. I'm going back to Shug McGahee. Again, I like the fact that she is cutting back just slightly in distance, because we are going 7 furlongs. You always want to call on that stamina for the last furlong there at 7 furlongs, and the fact that she went farther in her last race at Belmont, I think helps her. I liked the effort 2 back, even when she was second to Indian Pride, who would go on to do good things. So Dan, for me, it's Gamine over Mrs. Danvers, and we just have to enjoy the show, because this is a very special filly.
I like it. And I want to show, before we move on to Ellis, I do want to show, I pulled up a little bit of a of a trainer stat on Shug McGahee, who we're obviously heaping a ton of praise on already in this show here, for Mrs. Danvers. Past 5 years, specifically using jockey Jose Ortiz in stakes races. You know, I mean, as you might imagine, the numbers are pretty good. It'll take us a second here to pull it up, but essentially, Shug with Jose in dirt races, in dirt stakes races, very high percentage. I think we're looking at, let's see if it pulls up as I remember. I remembered 18 starts, 5 wins. Oh, this is a little bit of a larger sample, so all stakes past 5 years. Okay, so this will be this is dirt and turf. A bigger sample, but this is great. This is actually perfect. You see 21%, you see 56% in the money. If we were to only look for dirt, and we don't have to do that, you're looking at 13 of 18 starters finishing in the money when Jose is up for Shug. So just another kind of vote of confidence for Mrs. Danvers. Ellis, who do you think is finishing second to Gamine?
Up in smoke. Let's go back to the pace, the true odds page again, and sort on the late pace. And we'll look at the pace projection first over on the right. And you'll see, of course, the 5 Gamine is likely leader, of course, with that kind of speed. She's got a one-turn race. Venetian Harbor is on the outside. And Venetian Harbor is cutting back from a route, but she's a horse that needs the lead. I'm pretty confident Venetian Harbor is going to get tired from chasing Gamine, trying to get into the race. That's her only chance. And the fact is, when you go back to the late pace, the next late pace horse besides Gamine is Up in Smoke. And Up in Smoke is a really nice filly that ran. She won a stake called the Game Face Stakes. We can go back to the PPs and look at the PPs for her real quick. And you'll see she won the Game Face Stakes on June 6th. She ran 4th in the Grade 3 victory ride behind a really good sprinter in Frank's Rocket. Also look at those 95 and 96 figures. Now go look at Mrs. Danvers you guys were talking about. And the reason I didn't use Mrs. Danvers is because those figures were 82 and 80 when you go to the 3 Mrs. Danvers. Of course, Venetian Harbor has the second best figures. But again, I think she's going to get tired chasing the pace. So my exact is going to be 5-1 cold.
All right, so you're going with a 12-1 shot who probably goes off closer to 15 or 18-1. I'm going with the longest shot on the board in the morning line, or co-longest shot, Perfect Alibi to round out the exacta. You mentioned Frank's Rocket. Perfect Alibi beat Frank's Rocket twice at Saratoga last year, going 6.5 and going 7. Perfect Alibi has gone a mile and a 16th in the Breeders' Cup, went a mile coming back last out, was never really put into the race last out. On the cutback here is going to improve significantly. So I love Perfect Alibi at this distance to close into, well, I don't know if there's going to be much of a pace, but there are going to be certainly a number of horses that are going to be chasing Gamine. And I think Perfect Alibi passes those horses late at the very least and rounds out your exacta. All right, let's move on to the big one at Saratoga on Saturday, race 11. Is the Travers. So a couple of interesting storylines here. You got to step out for a minute and kind of look at the big picture. The big picture is Tiz the Law is already qualified for the Kentucky Derby. He's in. He won the Belmont Stakes. He has plenty of points. He's in the Kentucky Derby. That being said, his ownership team, Saratoga Stables, they're based in New York. The Travers for them has always been sort of the holy grail, and they want to win this race. And this is not just a prep or a tune-up. They want to win this race. That being said, Uncle Chuck still needs some points for the Kentucky Derby. He gets in if he finishes third, but realistically, I mean, nobody's aiming for third. So Uncle Chuck needs the points. He was out west. He was entered in the shared belief last week. Gets scratched out of that race, so he gets sent here. 1,000 words, wins for Baffert in the shared belief. And now, with confidence, Baffert ships Uncle Chuck to the East Coast, to the Travers, which he's won before, which he's had success in before. I want to know how some of those dynamics played into your thinking, Christina, before you ever even started handicapping this race, how all those sort of storylines and subplots played into the way you looked at this race.
Yeah, let's talk about Uncle Chuck a little bit here, because I think the strategy was sort of divide and conquer as far as Bob Baffert was concerned, because the shared belief was at a mile and a 16th. That worked to the advantage of 1,000 Words, who went on to be your winner. It worked against Honor AP, who ran second, and I think it would have worked against Uncle Chuck because he has that big, long stride. He wants as much ground as he can deal with. And how ironic is it that we are prepping for the Kentucky Derby in another 1.25-mile race? This is definitely a year like no other, and so we're learning quite a few things. But with Uncle Chuck, if you'll notice, his debut at Santa Anita was at a mile. Bob Baffert doesn't really debut horses at a mile on the dirt very often. That's not his MO. But this horse, and there's been a lot of comparisons about him to Arrogate. And, you know, Arrogate won the Travers, but that was his 5th start. Uncle Chuck is really having to play catch up. It's his third start this weekend, but he's big, he's scopy, he was a gorgeous horse at the sale. And actually for me, and I put this on Twitter earlier this week, he reminds me a little bit more of Midnight Loot, just the way he runs and that stride and everything about him, the way he looks. I think he's going to run very, very well. I think he's probably going to run second, but that's good enough for Bob Baffert this weekend because he already won the Shared Belief, and that qualifies Uncle Chuck for the Kentucky Derby. And so he had to just have the end goal, which isn't always, I think, what Bob Baffert does. You know, he wants to win today. He wants to win right now. But this horse really is playing catch up. And that's why I ultimately picked Tiz the Law, because I think the experience is going to work quite a bit in the favor of Tiz the Law. And who knows, at the end of the day, if Uncle Chuck is going to be as good as Tiz the Law, I'm not really sure about that. But I don't think he's quite there yet. I think it's asking a lot of this horse. So for me, I did pick Tiz the Law. If we could just show the last quarter mile of the Belmont, because there's been a lot of talk about Tiz the Law and will he get the 1.25 miles. You know, suddenly we're sort of questioning this horse, but I think it's only because we want to have something to talk about, don't we? But Barclay Tag has said, you know, he barely blows out a match anytime they send him over there, whether it's for a race or in the morning. And you'll see in the last quarter mile here when we get there that, you know, he's really striding out. He doesn't look like he's having any kind of a hard time. And if you look at any kind of speed figures, whether you like the Equibase speed figures that we offer here in stats, if you look at any other numbers, you know, he is a horse that dramatically improved as soon as he got the chance to go around 2 turns. Everything about him screams for the distance. And I really think with the defeat of Honor AP last week, you're looking at the Derby favorite most likely here, and we're going to have the chance to see him in action. And Dan, one thing that I also think is very interesting about him is, as good as he is to the law around the distance, and as good as he seems to keep getting with the distance, he's actually fairly quick out of the gate also. And he is a horse that just makes his own trip, puts himself in the right place. So for me, it's Tiz the Law. I think Uncle Chuck runs second. But I think in the back of his mind, Dan, Bob Baffert kind of knows that, and he's okay with that because he lost some of his bigger horses that he thought were going to run in the Kentucky Derby, and now he just needs to get who he has in the barn into the gate in a month.
Very interesting. Again, this is where I teased earlier that you may disappoint some people locally with going with the East Coast horse, but there's no real rivalry here, right? I mean, these horses haven't met before. Maybe it'll turn into one if we're lucky. Ellis, I'd pose this question to you: if you own Tiz the Law, and you're talking to Manny Franco before, not that the owner is gonna be giving riding directions to Manny Franco, but if you're talking to him, if you had a chance to talk to Manny Franco before the race, do you tell him, listen, if Uncle Chuck is loaded for bear, look, we don't need to win this race? Do you actually say those words? I mean, because I feel like deep down, you're probably thinking, please don't empty out our horse before the Derby.
I don't think you need to worry about it. I would not. My instructions to Manny would be just ride your race, have him 3rd or 4th early, and let him just kick in his athletic juices and his competitive juices. I don't think you need to worry about what Uncle Chuck's going to do. I'm not a Baffert hater, but I have very little interest in Uncle Chuck. Let's go to the pace, the true odds again. Look at the pace of the race. Uncle Chuck is going to probably be in front. That's projected to be in front, at least for the first half mile, because of his California speed and coming out of races. He got a 1.1 miles. But to Christina's point, he's not seasoned. And when we get to speed figures, we'll see there's other problems as well, in that he's just so far a rear of Tiz the Law. And he's also just the same as a bunch of other horses in this race, and all deference to Baffert. But let's go to the PPs and look at Uncle Chuck real quick, and we'll see something which I always worry about when I look at a horse like this. Not only is he not seasoned, but the field sizes of number 3 Uncle Chuck and those 2 races that he ran in were 4 and 5. He hasn't faced anybody yet. He hasn't been tested. It was a grade 3. I get it. 1,000 words. I got it. And people can say to me, well, you're taking a stand. Yes, I am. I think Uncle Chuck gets not maybe third if we're lucky here. I don't have much interest in him at all, especially since his law will be right on him and stalk. Uncle Chuck is the son of Uncle Mo. Now we're going to go to number 7, Caracaro, who is the other son of Uncle Mo, who's really intriguing to me as a second horse at Tislaw. I'll get back to Tislaw in a second. I'll say why he's a no-brainer. But Caracaro ran a 104 equibase feed figure in his second career start back in January, and then he was off for 6 months. That effort in the Peter Pan, where he made the lead and then battled the entire last eighth with Country Grammar, was phenomenal. If he takes the same kind of leap forward off of that 93 to 104 to 95 this time to about a 106, he's second all day in this race. And he's 10 to 1, even though Country Grammar is 6 to 1. And I respect David Aragona, the line maker, but still, I think that's wrong. I think Caracaro, as another son of Uncle Mo, has as good of a shot to do it here. Now we can take a look at the 2 Country Grammar, who also is on a similar pattern. Country Grammar is making his third start off a layoff. He has less improving to do than Caracaro does second off a layoff, but he ran good, a 98 back in his June race when he was third to Tap It to Win, who's run well. And then, of course, he won the Peter Pan. There's no knock on him, and Chad Brown certainly can train a horse. Moving over to Tis the Law, you'll see those 3 equibase speed figures of 113, 112, and 117. The first unheard of in my book. I've never seen it in 30 years where a horse that early in the year earns a 117 figure. Derby winners get about a 110, and this one got a 117. Came back off another layoff to get a 112 and then a 113. In front of the 8th pole, nobody had a chance to run. This is all about being an alpha male horse, and I don't think he loses. My play in the race is going to be Tis the Law over Caracaro and Country Grammar overall in the trifecta, and that's how I'm playing it.
Wow, no love for Uncle Chuck on this show. I like Uncle Chuck. I like Uncle Chuck a lot. I'll say I watched replay of the Los Al Derby, and it was pretty. And let's not forget, by the way, Luis Saez went out to Los Al to ride Uncle Chuck. Ended up getting coronavirus during the travels. But in that race, if you watch them turning for home, you watch that replay, watch what Luis Saez does. He could easily draw off with Uncle Chuck, but he wants Uncle Chuck to feel that feeling of being tested. So he allows 1,000 words to come up to him. He allows another horse to the inside to keep going and keep about a length in front of him. And when he gives him like 2 pumps, the way the horse strides out, I haven't seen a stride like that personally. Now, again, I'm not like, one of these great visual handicappers. I haven't seen anything like that since American Pharoah. So that's just me. That's just, one assessment. And visually, to me, Uncle Chuck, I think, is just raw, just talent. And if he can keep it together, and I think, you talked about pace, Ellis. I will say a horse we didn't mention is Chivalry. Chivalry is just a speedball, right? Chivalry is going to be out front, and certainly Chivalry could make things interesting. Could add a little spice to the early pace. That being said, I don't think Uncle Chuck needs to necessarily go head to head with Chivalry. I think could even let Chivalry take the lead, and if he does, I think that actually makes Chivalry a bit of a player in the exotics because the horse is a quality horse and didn't show his best in the bluegrass. Took a lot of pressure to his outside before fading, and I think if that horse gets to the lead, could certainly be a player in the exotics. I'm with both of you on, look, Tis the Law is Tis the Law. I think he's spectacular. I'm not going to like say he's off the board or anything. I expect him to run a really strong race. I'm just of the opinion, I think this is going to be a harder test than we're making it out to be. And I think push comes to shove, Manny Franco also wants to win the Kentucky Derby, and he wants to win a Triple Crown, albeit with an asterisk or whatever else. So for me, it's Uncle Chuck on top, and then underneath, I'll be playing a bunch of tickets with Chivalry, Tis the Law, and a little bit of Max Player as well, who we haven't said as much about, but Max Player, super game, super consistent. For a small sample, again, one of the more lightly raced horses in this field, but has really shown up every time. And that, I keep looking back at the race he ran in the Withers, was so wide, lost so much ground, and still drew off from a field that really didn't come back strong. That being said, Max Player proved, I guess, coming back in the Belmont that he is the real deal, and he's worth taking seriously. And I think he factors, at the very least, sort of on the lower end of the exotics. All right, before we go, we've got one more race for you. It's a little bonus race action here. This year, there are a number of new Kentucky Derby points races, and if you told me at the beginning of the year that the last 50-point Kentucky Derby points race was going to be run on a Sunday at Ellis Park, I would have thought you were crazy. But I mean, that's where we are. That's what this year is. And as it turns out, the Ellis Park Derby on Sunday is the last 50-point Kentucky Derby qualifier. And the likely favorite, well, he doesn't need any points. It's Art Collector. He won the Bluegrass Stakes, his third win in a row, all since returning to the races in June. He's already Derby bound. The question is, with a number of other horses in this field in desperate need of qualifying points for the Derby, and again, no need to overextend Art Collector, is there potential for an upset in this race, or is it simply Art Collector all day because he's already proven head and shoulders above these, and we've seen these horses in a number of different races already? Christina, where did you land?
Well, I landed on Art Collector. Let's take a quick look at his past performances, just because you can see, as you mentioned, Dan, since he came back this year, he's been very good. He's 3 for 3 in 2020. And he also took a pretty dramatic step forward when he got the chance to go 2 turns on the dirt. Those last 2 races for him, markedly better than anything else that he had done in the past. And so I'm really intrigued by this sort of late developer, I guess we'll call him. And it seems like Thomas Drury really has kind of figured him out. I'm also happy to see Brian Hernandez Jr. with a chance on a really nice horse, because he's a rider that I'm a big fan of. He's one that is always saving ground, whether it's on the dirt or on the turf. I think if you watched him even down in South Florida, he rode some really nice turf races, and he does the same thing at Churchill on that main track. So looking forward to seeing what they can do. He is the horse to beat. But I'm interested in the horse Far Outside in Shared Sense. And I think maybe a big part of it for me is that I was such a big fan of Maxfield, and we're talking about a son of Street Sense again in here. And as you watch the offspring of Street Sense, it's one of the angles that I use pretty often just in general. As soon as they get the chance to go 2 turns, they really do relish the added distance on the main track, and they continue to keep getting better. So Shared Sense, if you notice, 2 starts back, he was second to Art Collector in that optional claiming race at Churchill Downside Allowance race back on June 13th. But this is a horse that I think is also kind of improving a little bit, and I'm hoping that he starts to continue taking the steps forward that Art Collector did. We could take a look at maybe the last quarter mile of that Indiana Derby, because what I liked about him was that he really never gave up. He was kind of buried at the rail in this particular trip, and Florent Giroux was doing everything he could to save ground with him. And eventually, he's going to get the chance to kind of switch out a little bit to the outside, and he sort of idles for a second. I think he's a horse that's still learning a little bit, but as soon as he got the chance to see company to his outside, that's when he kicked it into gear again. That's when he kind of carried on, and he really went on to that victory by 3 lengths, and he looked pretty powerful at that point. So to me, he was sort of running in spots just a little bit in this race until he felt the heat of battle. And I think there's more to him. I think he has the ability to keep improving. We'll see if he's good enough to turn the tables on Art Collector this weekend. But if I'm looking elsewhere, he's probably the horse that I will end up on. And then, Dan, just one other point about another horse in the race, and that's Dean Martini for Tom Amis. Dean Martini beat South Bend in the Ohio Derby last time out. Depending on how South Bend runs on Saturday in the Travers, that might tell you a little bit more about Dean Martini, so you can kind of follow the dominoes as they go throughout the weekend, and maybe it points you to this horse a little bit more come Sunday.
That's a really good point there. So keep an eye on how that shakes out. I know you stole a little bit of Ellis's thunder here with Shared Sense and Dean Martini, two horses that Ellis likes, along with Art Collector. Ellis, you also like Little Menace. Start where you'd like here, and tell us how you play this race.
Well, I don't like Little Menace. I love Little Menace, along with
Oh,
our collector. I didn't know. I just looked. This horse is 20-1 in the morning line, and I couldn't be more excited about betting this race. And the reason is very simple. Look at Little Menace. He sprinted his whole life. He ran okay. He ran second in the Gazebo Stakes, the Bachelor. Asmussen gave him 2 months off. And if you look at that breeding, by the way, into Mischief and Archmare, that does not scream sprinting. 2 months off, he ran him back in a little listed stakes called the Grand Prairie Derby. The horse battled head and head for the entire first 3/4 of the race, and then he draws off by 3 with a 103 figure. Now let's look at the favorite Art Collector, and this is not a knock because Art Collector is a horse I'm using as much. Art Collector has run Equibase speed figures of 102, 106, 97, and 105, but just the routes, 106 and 102. Little Menace just ran a 103. Those are the only two horses to have broken the 100 threshold in their last starts. And the difference is Art Collector's 4-5 and Little Menace is 20-1. And one thing I want to look at is Asmussen, and I had set this up, and hopefully we have it here. I looked at Asmussen, second layoff in the stakes, and I think it might be last out win or not, but it was a very good statistic. This one here is dirt second route, non-graded stakes, but it was second off a layoff, and it was in a stakes race. And we can pull that up and see. Change it to stakes. And we'll see something interesting. Anyway, this horse cost $460,000 at auction, the most expensive horse in the field. He's just coming around now. He's a perfect example, like Art Collector is the COVID-19 delayed Triple Crown season has really made a difference. Our collector wouldn't have been in the mix. He didn't have his breakout race till May 17th. Little Menace didn't have his breakout race till June 28th. And there's Asmussen, no, second after layoff stakes. Maybe it was last out winner. I set the shot, but I guess we don't have it right now. So just let's go back to the PPs. Actually, let's go to the True Odds page, and we'll see something interesting because Little Menace led from start to finish. As I said, he battled in that race last time out. And in this True Odds, you'll see Little Menace is projected to be on the lead with Sprawl and Anoda Orr behind him. I think it's going to be a little clearer than that. And also, if you go and sort on the late pace, I think that was what I was looking at. Little Menace at the top. So here's a horse that likes to lead. That's the best late pace in the race. And lo and behold, I hadn't looked to last. But if you look at the win probability over on the race projection, Little Menace actually has the top win probability in this field. So this is a really good play at 20-1 for one of the top trainers in the country, is Steve Asmussen, a horse that's bred to get the trip, that ran as fast as Art Collector last time out. So my play in the race is going to be a win on Little Menace, exactas and trifectas with Little Menace to Art Collector over a bunch of horses in second and third. And I think this is a fantastic betting race. I do have a little bit of love for Shared Sense that Christina talked about, a little bit of love for Dean Martini as well, but more in second and third. I think Little Menace can post the upset or be second at a big price here to Art Collector.
Ellis not playing any games, just dropping 20-1 shots race after race now as potential horses who could win or at least hit the board, giving you value, which is exactly what we want. And as you're handicapping these races using Stats Race Lens, you could use all these tools here to project pace, to try to figure out who's got the best late kick there. So an interesting tidbit there on Little Menace, a horse that I sort of overlooked myself a little bit, to be honest with you. I thought that one horse who was sneaky fast in this race and could potentially try to run away with it a little bit was Rowdy Yates. The race projection has Rowdy Yates nowhere near the front. But you know, if you watch the horse's previous races, you can make the argument that he'll be forwardly placed. Had some trip trouble in the past. He also won the Ellis Park Juvenile Stakes here at Ellis back last August. He wired that field. And for me, just for a more logical play, I think I'd give you attachment rate. This is one who ran, I think, a sneaky good race in the Bluegrass Stakes. He didn't break well at all, and then made a really early move down the backstretch just to get a little closer to the front end. Often you see those kinds of moves lead to horses fading in the stretch, but he actually kept on. His Matt win was equally impressive. We talked about, and by the way, right now we're on attachment rate, who I believe is the 10 horse. There we go. His Matt win 2 races back. You see he finished 4th, but look at the horse he finished behind. Maxfield, a horse would obviously be the favorite in this race, or co-favorite with our collector. New York Traffic came back, finished 2nd in the Haskell. Pneumatic, 4th in the Belmont Stakes. And in that race as well, he probably had the worst trip of any in that race. He was caught 6 wide into the first turn, raced wide throughout. He's had excuses. And again, if you're going to just base simply on trip handicapping, take a look at the right side of the screen there again. All those red marks, bumped, bothered at the start, in tight, bumped. And he's always still there late. You might also notice the race 3 back, the Unbridled. Look who he finished 2nd to. Dr. Post, 2nd in the Belmont Stakes. So I think he's been keeping the right kind of company. I think we can try to get creative with, the Ohio Derby and the Indiana Derby horses, and not to discount anything those horses have done. But when you've been running with what appears to be sort of the upper echelon of this year's sort of 3-year-old crop, especially at this stage in the season, I give a little more. A little more credence to some of the results that we've seen from attachment rate. I think this may represent to a certain extent a little bit of class relief, because it's only art collector here. There's no Swiss skydiver in this race. So I look for art attachment rate to turn up with a big effort. All right, let's wrap up for now. I do want to remind you before we go, the special this weekend on Stats Race Lens, you can get an unlimited annual subscription to Stats Race Lens. Again, every card, every day for an entire year for $400 off. All you have to do is use the promo code SAVE400. That's SAVE400. And this offer is only going to be available through Sunday. It's a flash sale. If you want to use Stats Race Lens, you want to explore some of the tools we've kind of dug into tonight a little bit. You want to do your customized searches. You want to look at pace projectors. You want to save searches. You want to find angles that you might not be able to find offhand. Everything you need in one package here. $400 off. Save 400 on your annual subscription. Use that promo code, and this is the weekend to do it. All right, for Christina Blacker and for Ellis Starr and for Tom Kudla and the entire team at Equibase, I want to say thank you for listening. Good luck this weekend. We will catch you next time.